After Godzilla vs. Biollante failed to meet box office expectations, Toho tried recentering the entire Godzilla series on recognizable monsters. Ironically enough, their first attempt at course correction didn't even center around Godzilla, who is their most popular monster. Instead, producer Tomoyuki Tanaka pushed a Mothra revival and hired Kazuki Ōmori to write Mothra vs. Bagan. It was a fantasy-driven script that was set 1 year after Biollante. It included globe-spanning locations, the return of Miki, and the pop duo Wink as the Shobijin.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, the film collapsed before shooting because Toho feared audiences wouldn't show up for a kaiju film that didn't feature Godzilla.
I hate him, butthead!
The studio shelved Bagan and instead fast-tracked Godzilla vs. King Ghidorah, which was a hit at the Japanese box office. From there, Toho revisited the Mothra idea and asked Ōmori to rebuild his unused script around Godzilla. Early rewrites replaced Bagan with Evil Mothra, which eventually became Battra. Ōmori decided not to direct because 2 Godzilla productions in a row, Biollante and King Ghidorah, had burned him out. So Toho promoted Takao Okawara. Ōmori delivered a lighter adventure-driven script with an Indiana Jones-style prologue and a story centered on a divorced couple and their daughter. Producer Shogo Tomiyama approved Okawara because he came through the Toho system and understood their studio workflow. Koichi Kawakita, the film's visual effects director, briefly pitched a sequel that involved a Mecha-Mothra, but that idea was completely scrapped. Okawara assembled a cast built for light comedy and broad family appeal. Tetsuya Besso and Satomi Kobayashi led the film, with Keiko Imamura and Sayaka Osawa taking on the role of the Cosmos, which are basically the Shobijin. Akira Takarada returned for a cameo as a nod to the 1964 classic. Even Ishiro Honda, the director of countless Godzilla films in the 50s, 60s, and 70s, visited the set, offering a symbolic blessing shortly before his passing in 1993. Kawakita's team built new suits and puppets for all 3 monsters. Godzilla received an updated suit with refined facial features and improved head articulation. Meanwhile, Mothra stayed close to her classic design, while Battra went through multiple redesigns to emphasize its harsher personality. Toho also constructed massive Yokohama miniatures for the finale, complete with a working Ferris wheel and thousands of tiny building lights. Composer Akira Ifukube returned once again to score the film, blending his classic themes with brand new arrangements for both Mothra and Battra. During production, a Godzilla suit from Godzilla vs. Biollante was stolen and later found washed up on the shores of Lake Okutama.
Well, tri-state citizens, beware. Godzilla is on the loose. Unbelievably, someone has stolen the rubber Godzilla model from a Japanese special effects department in Tokyo. The model was made for a new Godzilla movie coming out in Japan. Now, the theft won't affect the film's premiere. I'm sure you're glad to hear that. I know. Jerry's relieved. But the 13-foot high-tech model is worth $39,000, and the Japanese, who have a real yen for their favorite movie star, they want him back. Has anyone checked with King Kong?
Where do you hide something like that? Well, Jerry will be right back with a Godzilla of a sportscast, you promise.
While the thief was never found, the crew did patch it up and they actually used the suit for some of the wide water shots where the damage was harder to spot. Godzilla vs. Mothra opened on December 12th, 1992, and it became a runaway hit, selling over 4 million tickets and becoming Japan's top-grossing domestic film of 1993. However, the film didn't reach the United States until 1998 when Columbia TriStar issued it on home video as Godzilla and Mothra: The Battle for Earth. The release coincided with the American Godzilla movie, which boosted interest in Toho's catalog of endless Godzilla films. Western reception, though, was mixed, with some liking the nostalgic, colorful tone, while others criticized the rushed storytelling. For me personally, Godzilla vs. Mothra is an entry that I always felt was exceptionally mediocre. I didn't love it, but I also didn't hate it. For every standout moment, there was another sequence that dragged the film down. Honestly, it's been a hot minute since I've watched this one, so I'm curious to see if it's better than I remember it being, or if it is in fact one of the weaker parts of this era. Without wasting any more time, this is Godzilla vs. Mothra. A meteor awakens Godzilla and stirs up enough chaos to unearth a massive egg on Infant Island. The egg hatches into Mothra, just as Battra, a destructive dark counterpart to Mothra, emerges from the ocean and tears through Japan. Godzilla, Mothra, and Battra collide near the Philippines, dragging each other into a fiery undersea fissure. All three later resurface around Japan. Godzilla erupts from Mount Fuji, Battra transforms into his winged imago, and Mothra emerges from her cocoon over Tokyo. Battra and Mothra briefly team up to stop Godzilla in Yokohama, overwhelming him with coordinated attacks. As they carry him out to sea, Godzilla kills Battra, forcing Mothra to complete Battra's mission and fly into space to intercept an incoming meteor. Godzilla vs. Mothra functions as a rather blatant, surface-level remake of 1964's Mothra vs. Godzilla, and it's one of the earliest examples of Toho lifting an older Godzilla film almost beat for beat. You can loosely frame The Return of Godzilla as a modernized remake of the 1954 original, but it never mirrors the structure the way this film does, and that one is technically a sequel. It's a sequel. Godzilla vs. Mothra, the 1992... You know what? When I say Godzilla vs. Mothra, I'm talking about the 90s movie. When I talk about Mothra vs. Godzilla, it's the 60s movie. Now that we have that out of the way, Godzilla vs. Mothra deliberately redraws a very familiar outline, only this time with updated effects and a new early 90s tone and a few added elements to freshen the formula. The presence of veteran Godzilla actor Akira Takarada really gives the film a strange legacy sequel kind of feel. It's not marketed that way, and legacy sequel wouldn't be a term that was invented years after this, but his involvement kind of anchors the movie in Toho's history, and that nostalgia paired with the newer ideas like Battra kind of makes the film work. On paper, this should have been a solid blend of the old and the new. In practice, though, the choice to revisit one of the best films in the Showa era creates a major hurdle. Mothra vs. Godzilla is beloved. It is a benchmark. It is a masterpiece. Trying to top it demands a near perfect film, and Godzilla vs. Mothra just doesn't reach that height. I don't hate this movie by any means. It delivers some fantastic sequences, some very strong visual moments, and a few clever reinterpretations of the old story, but the problem comes from how those pieces sit together. Every time the film hits something impressive, it follows it with a decision that weakens that momentum. The contrast becomes so consistent that it shapes the entire viewing experience. I'm not going to try to fall into a rhythm of praising something and then saying, but that might happen a couple times here. This is one of those reviews where that dynamic becomes nearly unavoidable because it exists in the movie itself. First, I want to dig into the visuals because they form the core of how people remember this movie. There are moments where the film looks genuinely immaculate. Some shots are so striking that they've become shorthand for what the Heisei era represents in fans' minds, myself included. Whether it be Mothra forming her cocoon in downtown Tokyo, Godzilla rising out of the volcano, Battra's transformation into his imago form, these are images that define the decade. They are bold and colorful and dramatic, and they highlight just how ambitious Toho could be when everything is lined up. The problem comes from how these moments are filmed. A lot of the cinematography actively works against the work of the effects team. The movie relies on what I call the Star Trek shaky cam effect, where the camera shakes while everything on set stays nearly perfectly still. Classic Star Trek and Star Trek The Next Generation did this constantly, and once you spot it here, it sticks out like a sore thumb. You'll see Mothra or Battra sitting motionless in the frame with a miniature city below them, and the camera is just shaking in this attempt to mimic movement. All it does is expose the limitations of the puppetry and the compositing work. It looks rough. The most frustrating part is how often this shaky cam shows up when the scene absolutely didn't need it.
Godzilla!
Meanwhile, there are some miniature sequences here that stand among the best that Toho has ever produced. The finale in Yokohama with the Ferris wheel. It's incredible. It's so impressive. The lighting, the architecture, the layout, it all feels carefully designed, and it proves that the team still had the skill to deliver top-tier tokusatsu craftsmanship. And then the compositing steps in and drags everything down. The green screen work that places human actors in front of these miniatures is extremely inconsistent. At points, you can see characters literally clipping into the buildings.
Boy, I really hope somebody got fired for that blunder.
You can sense how rushed these shots were, and that pressure really shows in the final product. Selling the idea of giant flying monsters with 1992 technology takes an enormous amount of labor, and the miniatures themselves required real dedication. These sets were built with functioning lights, careful paintwork, and complex destruction mechanisms. The problem isn't the crew not caring, it's the fact that the timeline they were forced to work under was very rushed. By this point in the series, Toho had committed to yearly Godzilla releases again, which for fans is great. For the people making the movies, that sucks. That release schedule crushed their ability to refine the effects. You can see the difference clearly when you compare this movie to Godzilla vs. Biollante, which had way more time, way more freedom, and way more experimentation behind it. Biollante featured industry-leading practical effects that rivaled what Hollywood was doing at the time. Only 3 years later, Godzilla vs. Mothra looks like such a major step backward. I watched this movie with my dad recently, and he was genuinely surprised when I said that it came out in 1992. He said it looked like something that would have came out in 1982, and I can't disagree. With more money and more time, this could have been another groundbreaking showcase for Toho's effects crew. Instead, the visuals land in a strange middle ground where the ambition is very obvious and commendable, but the execution is rather poor.
Godzilla!
The human storyline in Godzilla vs. Mothra is also very promising on paper. The film centers on a divorced couple whose relationship begins in open hostility and slowly shifts towards something resembling reconciliation. That setup has potential for a grounded emotional arc, especially within a Japanese film. Divorce in Japan carries a different cultural weight than it does here in America. I'm not trying to be like thing America bad and then thing Japan good. I promise. What I'm getting at is it can be seen as more shameful, disruptive, and socially isolating in Japan. Not that it isn't here in America, but in that culture, it's different. A reconciliation arc between ex-spouses in a Japanese story can land with more emotional gravity than the same plotline would here in the US. But the problem is that the tone of the movie never supports that emotional framework. The story leans into light comedy, and that constant cheerfulness undercuts the very thing the human plot is supposed to explore. I'm not looking for something on par with Marriage Story.
Every day I wake up!
That was never going to happen in a movie like this. It's not built for that. But the characters are navigating a serious personal conflict, yet the film keeps pushing in the opposite direction with slapstick energy, quirky delivery, and breezy pacing. Instead of actually elevating the drama, the comedy flattens it. A divorced couple narrative can work in a Godzilla movie. Godzilla King of the Monsters from 2019 handled this type of dynamic more effectively, even though that film had its own writing problems.
Ghidorah, the one who's many.
She's a gonorrhea.
I'm not expecting something super raw and layered, but there needs to be more substance than two people who once liked each other eventually remember that they used to like each other. This movie treats it like a quick character checkpoint as opposed to something that demands real time and effort put into it. And the issue isn't the comedic, family-friendly style. Each major Godzilla era shifts in that direction anyways. The Showa era starts grim, and then we get Jet Jaguar. The Heisei era began with darker political undertones, and then we get Space Godzilla. The Monsterverse moves from a very somber tone to monkey fighting ice dragon versus Godzilla, and Baby Kong is there. These tonal swings are part of the franchise's identity. I love it for that reason. Godzilla survives because he can function in stories for adults and kids. Franchises like Transformers and Marvel rely on that same flexibility. Meanwhile, He-Man and DC have struggled because they committed too heavily to one tone without balancing the other. So a comedic family-oriented Godzilla film is never a problem. The issue, though, is the writing. The humor and the character drama just never really line up with one another. The emotional arcs are never deepened, and because the movie chooses to ride a lighthearted tone, it ends up stripping away its own potential. What I'm getting at is, why take a divorce storyline and then try to have it in a more family-friendly movie when that clearly deserves a more dramatic tone? Like, let's maybe not have this be the plotline, let's maybe save this for a more dramatic movie. I don't know. That's my main issue with it. Miki is, of course, one of the few consistently strong presences in the human cast, but her screen time is so limited that she barely influences the story. 3 films into this era, and this is the point where I start questioning why her character wasn't given more focus. She is a psychic who can sense Godzilla's emotions and intentions. Why isn't she the main character? She could and should have been the core protagonist of the Heisei era. She could have anchored the human perspective as the one person in the world with a direct link to Godzilla. Instead, she gets pushed to the sidelines again and again. She does play a huge role in Godzilla vs. Space Godzilla, but that is the exception, and we are not there yet. Across the rest of her appearances, her abilities never shape the narrative in a meaningful way. The Heisei films had a character with a genuinely unique perspective, as it's someone who could blur the line between the human drama and the kaiju action, and they barely used her. Ultimately, I do think that it's one of the biggest missed opportunities in the entire era. The themes in Godzilla vs. Mothra are also very, very basic. The film focuses on environmental protection, and that subject has appeared in the series before with far more depth. Godzilla vs. Ghidorah explored pollution with surreal imagery, sharp social commentary, and a sense of anger that cut through the camp. In that film, you could feel the cultural anxiety of early 70s Japan, where pollution was a real nationwide crisis. Godzilla vs. Mothra revisits the same idea, but without the urgency or the imagination. The messaging is delivered in the most straightforward way possible. Characters frequently gather indoors and explain the themes to each other in direct dialogue. They talk about harmony with nature, the consequences of human recklessness, and the damage caused by exploitation, but these scenes rarely build toward anything meaningful. There's no subtext. There's no layered symbolism for the audience to unpack. The film presents its themes as simple statements, nothing more. They are not ideas that grow out of the story, and I'm not asking for elaborate poetic depth here. Godzilla movies have proven that they can be accessible and family-friendly while still weaving in interesting themes. Even the Showa movies that you people like to say don't have any themes do have themes. They just manage that balance in a way that works. The franchise has a long history of embedding commentary into the monsters themselves, whether it's Cold War paranoia, nuclear trauma, or technological hubris. Godzilla vs. Mothra has room to explore similar territory, but keeps everything at a surface level. Outside of the environmental angle, the movie tries to make a small attempt to comment on corporate greed. I think they're only doing this because the original Mothra vs. Godzilla did this. The older movie builds its commentary naturally through the actions of the cast. The 1992 film reduces the same ideas to simple remarks. Everything Godzilla vs. Mothra tries to express has already been explored more effectively in its predecessor. The themes are present, but they sit on the surface without ever developing into anything richer or even remotely compelling.
Why are you so fucking negative all the time?
Okay, let's move away now from the negatives. I promise I don't hate this movie. I promise you guys. Battra is a genuinely compelling addition to the lineup. He feels distinct in both personality and design. I love his sharper, more aggressive silhouette, which contrasts perfectly with Mothra's soft, rounded features. Battra stands out because he expands the visual language of the insect-based kaiju, my least favorite type of kaiju. The tragedy, though, is that he only appears in this one movie. A monster this striking deserves a longer legacy, and his absence from later entries really contributes to why he tends to get overlooked. Mothra, meanwhile, receives an enormous amount of attention. At times, the film shifts so heavily toward her that it starts to feel like a Mothra solo film, with Godzilla and Battra just being supporting characters. I want to make it abundantly clear, I do not mind this approach one bit. When a monster has as much cultural weight and mythic energy as Mothra, it makes sense to let her carry the movie. You can see how much the filmmakers adore her, and I love that. The reverence is built into the framing, the music, and even the way the camera lingers on her metamorphosis. She feels like a perfect continuation of the Showa design with small minor adjustments that give her a more refined and elegant presence. When I think of Mothra, this is the version that comes to mind. Godzilla's role is smaller, but his appearances are used effectively. His design doesn't change much from the rest of the era, yet he carries the same presence and weight that made the Heisei suit so iconic. The filmmakers treat him like a force that enters the story at key moments, as opposed to the central character driving it forward. Hot take, that limited usage works in his favor 99% of the time, because every appearance feels like a major event in the movie, as opposed to, say, the next film in the series, Godzilla vs. Mecha-Godzilla 2, where the big G has an abundance of screen time, and you feel it. Like, this dude is on screen a lot, and it kind of ruins the moment in a way, because the mystique is gone. Akira Ifukube's score is probably the film's brightest highlight. His work on Godzilla vs. King Ghidorah relied heavily on familiar motifs. In a way, it reminded me of John Williams' work on The Rise of Skywalker, where he just rehashed and re-recorded old scores that he had composed and created decades prior, much to critical acclaim. However, Ifukube's work on Godzilla vs. Mothra feels much more energized, emotional, and original. The Battra theme is awesome. It adds this sense of ancient menace, while the updated Mothra theme brings warmth and grandeur. It's such a huge step up from the 60s. The score really elevates scenes that struggle visually, and it gives the film a sense of scale that it doesn't always earn through effects alone. The finale, where Mothra silently ascends into space while Ifukube's music swells, is genuinely moving. I swear, there's like a psychological effect that this has where the visuals aren't the best, but the music makes it so much better. I don't know what it is. Once everything is all said and done, the film leaves me in a very conflicted place. There are elements that shine, and elements that completely fall apart. The experience as a whole settles somewhere in the middle, where strong ideas and impressive moments collide with rushed execution and uneven storytelling. It's not a disaster. It's not a triumph. It sits in a strange place in the Godzilla franchise, where its predecessor is vastly superior, and its successors surpass everything this movie tried to do. Future Godzilla films in the Heisei era pretty much ignore the events, with the exception of an offhand reference in Godzilla vs. Space Godzilla. So this just feels like the most forgettable entry in the entire franchise. Not good, not bad, just brutally mediocre. And with all that out of the way, I'm Cole McCormick. You are watching Firewood Media. This is part 21 of my massive Godzilla retrospective project, where I revisit and review every single Godzilla movie and TV show. I already know what you're going to ask in the comments. I'm sure there's already comments demanding I do this. Let me just address it now. Yes, I will cover the Mothra trilogy as well as the Mothra 1961 movie in the future. It is definitely on the docket, but it is not a major priority at this moment. The goal is to finish the 90s Godzilla stuff, finish up Gamera, and then start my Ultraman retrospective series, and then I'll start doing some of the Mothra stuff. I might just honestly do all the Mothra stuff in one big video. I think that might be the best way to tackle it, so I'm not just spamming your guys', subscription feeds. Which, by the way, subscribe. I really want to hit 50k subs by Christmas. We're at about 48k right now, so little under 2,000 to go. We'll be there. Huge thank you to all of our channel members for supporting the channel. Your names are listed right here on screen. For just $1.99 a month, you can get early access to all of my videos, plus exclusive members-only content, and you can see your name featured in the credits of all of our original films and videos just like these. Either way, thank you so much for watching. Thank you for sticking with me, and I will see you in the next one. Peace out.